Hello and welcome to another Oblivion Plays video, where today I will be flying from London Gatwick, as you can see, all the way over to Skiathos, which is a small island just found in the northwest Aegean Sea, off the east of mainland Greece. And the airport there is of particular interest because it's been labelled the St Martin of Greece, so it's quite a challenging approach. Quite a short runway, particularly for a 757, and there's some nice add-on scenery that I've installed, the link of which is in the description below. But as you can see, I'm in this Thomson 757 modelled by QualityWings, and it's in the Dreamliner livery, which Thomson have started to roll out onto their 757s as well as their 787s, and as you can see, it's on this particular plane, the Golf Oscar Bravo Hotel. So without further ado, let's jump into the cockpit. You can hear the passengers boarding in the background, but let's just do the cold and dark start checklist, which is found in the default flight simulator checklist section. You can't see it because I'm recording, but I'll talk through what it says. First of all, we'll start on the overhead panel, and the first thing we do is we just need to switch on the batteries. You can close that cover. Oops. And we stick the standby power selector to auto. The external power or APU we can set, and what I'll do is I'll just demonstrate what the external power unit looks like as we can use it. So what you need to do is find the QualityWings button in the virtual cockpit, which is found here. You can see the QW. Click on that, and then click on this ground power button here. If we jump outside, you can see the little external power unit just there. What we can now do is, if we go back to the overhead panel, you can see that external power is now available. So you click that, and there we go. We've got power from that ground power unit. Okay, so the next thing we can do is move on to the receiving aircraft checklist. So what we need to do is just go back into the virtual cockpit, is set the altimeters. So I'll do the cheating version, which is just by pressing B, although you can see the ATIS up at the top. So it's 1037 was the QNH. So just make sure that's gone in correctly. So yeah, 1037. Parking brake is set, and you can see that confirmed down there in the bottom left. The fuel control switches are on cutoff. That's these two here, and they are indeed on the cutoff. And I've got to switch back to the overhead panel. Make sure that these are the IRS control switches, and we need to switch all three to nav. And we need to click on the yaw damper buttons, which are these two here. I don't know why they're up on the overhead panel, because normally they're in the autopilot control panel, but I won't argue with Boeing. It's up there, and then all we have to do is click them on. We need to make sure on the hydraulic panel, which is just below the yaw damper, that's this bit here, we want to make sure that the engine pump switches are on, which they are. The electronic pump switches are off, which they are, and all the lights are on. So all the lights for the hydraulic pumps and all the lights for the fuel pumps are on, which is good. Just make sure that everything's working. The electric panel, we've already switched the battery to on. The standby power is on auto, and the generator cont switches, these two here, are on. We can now switch on the APU. It's probably not strictly necessary because we have the external power, but it's just to help us start up the engines. I've clicked it too many times. You just click it once, and it will start up. The emergency lights we need to make sure are armed, so they're currently unarmed. Just click, and there we go, they're armed. The engine start panel, we are on an odd day today, so we make sure that it's on the odd number 1. The fuel panel, we haven't fueled up yet, so these values are incorrect. But I'll double check them once we've refueled. But all the pumps are off. All the anti-ice are off. Position nav lights switch on. The seatbelt signs are off. Air conditioning checked and set. So we want the APU bleed switch on, which it is. The isolation on, and the PAX to auto. And you can hear the air conditioning start in the background. Right, so now we can switch back to the virtual cockpit. So we want the flight director on and the auto throttle on. And we want to check the EFIS control panel, that the HSI range selector is as desired. We'll put it on, let me just move this back. That's too far. 20 will do. Traffic, we can turn on the TCAS. The HSI mode selector we want onto map. So Shift 6 brings it up, so it's a little bit clearer, and we'll just switch that to map. There we go. Then we can actually see what we're doing. Right, so we can now program the FMS. We can left-click that. We can just click the position Init button, and that just confirms that we are indeed at Gatwick. Click the route button. So we're at Gatwick, EG. Oops, let me just clear this off. KK. And our destination today is Skiathos, which is Lima Golf, Sierra Kilo. And it just takes a little while to program in, but as you can see, at the moment we've got a direct course to Skiathos. But what we now need to do is just put in our waypoints. As per my previous videos, I've used PFPX to program all my information. So that includes random payload, the fuel calculations, the alternate destinations, and the waypoints themselves. So it's a really useful piece of software. It just kind of saves a lot of time and helps you to program. Once again, as for every add-on that I've mentioned, the links to the software are in my description below. Click the next page, and the first waypoint. I'll show you the first few waypoint inputs, just so you can see how you do it in the QualityWings flight computer. But after that, I'll skip because there is quite a lot of information. But you'll see a map. I'll put up a map which will show the route that I'm taking. Excluding the SID, which we'll program after this, our first waypoint is DVR. And as you can see, because there's more than one DVR in the world, it gives us the coordinates for the two places. The other advantage of PFPX is it does give you the coordinates on your flight plan page. So the DVR that we're looking for is N5109.8 East 00121.5. So that's this one here. Slight difference in the coordinates, but that's fine. So next one is UL9, the airway UL9. So airways go in the via section, and then the 2 is the waypoint. So that's Conan, Kilo Oscar November Alpha November. And I'll put in the next one to show you, which is UL607. And then Kilo Oscar Kilo. Rather rude one. And then I'll input the rest of the information, but we'll skip this. So the last waypoint is UN137 to SKP, skip, which is right next to Skiathos, and that's kind of where you start your approach from. There's no official arrival route, as in there's no star, but there are some arrival routes, but Pro-ATC will guide us through that. The next thing we need to do is press the Init Ref Button, and this programs all our performance information. So our reserves today are 3,145 pounds. Not quite sure why that came up with 2.3, but we'll roll with it. The cruise altitude today is 370. Right, at this point, actually it might be because I haven't put in the fuel. So what we'll do, at this point we'll just get the fuel on board. So catering and refueling. Okay, so I've just inputted the fuel information into the default FSX fuel panel section. We're going to be using 24,576 pounds of fuel, including our reserves and the alternate airports. So I converted it to kilograms and rounded it up to 12,000 kilograms. So that's 9,000 kilograms in the central tank and 1,500 in the wing tanks. And it's only, I mean, the central tank was only 40% full, and the two wing tanks were only 20% full. So we're not getting anywhere near the range of the 757. We can now open our service doors for the catering service. We need to jump into the cockpit and open these two service doors here. And as you can see, the catering trolley guys will be doing their business. Okay, so that's the last of the catering done. Let's jump into the cockpit. We therefore need to click these two buttons to close the service doors again. And we can now just try programming this information again. The reserves were 3,145. There we go. I think it must have been because the amount of fuel I had left over in the tanks actually was less than what I was trying to input. So fuel is put in. The cruise altitude is flight level 370. Cost index is 10 for Thompson aircraft. I'll put in a link to a kind of a list of all the aircraft for most carriers and what cost indexes the carriers use for each aircraft, and I'll put that in the description below. So for takeoff, we'll use flat 5. Gatwick's got a very long runway, so we'll pop that there and just make sure, yep, so it's popped in the V-speeds on my primary flight display. And what we can put into the autopilot is the V2 plus 25, so 180. There we go, and that'll be our initial climb speed. And we can now go on to the departure and arrival information. So departure, we need to just get from clearance now. Right, so we can just flip over those two. And fingers crossed that's activated the clearance. There we go. Okay, so you might have noticed me just changing the altitude, so I'll just change that to the initial altitude that air was cleared to. The active runway is 08 right, according to ATIS. There can be a discrepancy between ATIS, because the ATIS is obviously from the default FSX. There can be a discrepancy between that and what Pro-ATC is using, because Pro-ATC uses the real live weather updates. So that's just something to consider if you do use it. But it's not a big deal, we can just change it very quickly if that happens. So we're looking for so actually it looks like it could have, let's have a look, DVR. Yeah, so I think it is using the other runway. DVR 8M, 26 left via DVR 8M. So let's make sure this is popped into the route correctly. I'll go back. So direct to so yeah, that looks fine. So we can go onto the legs page and just make sure that it all looks correctly. It all looks correct. which it does. So go back to root, and we'll just check it one last time, and then we'll click the execute button, and there we go, that's activated. And we'll actually get people on board. So obviously that's differing to what the announcement's saying. So I'll just change the V speeds again because it's just changed there, saying V1 is in op. It could have been because I changed the runway, or added the runway, I should say. Let's see if that baggage stuff is coming. It is. So I'll just skip ahead. You don't have to watch all these bags getting boarded onto the aircraft, and then we can start the before start checklist. Alright, so that's the last few bits of baggage being put on board. The passengers are all on board already. Let's jump back into the cockpit, and we'll get rid of all this ground equipment, including the jetway and the ground power unit. Close all the doors, and then we can start the before start checklist. So let me just make sure APU generator's on, so that's fine. We can turn off the external power, get rid of it on the control panel, and then we can close the cargo doors and the entry doors. And there's no doors listed on the warnings, so that's great. The next thing we need to do is just go on back onto the overhead panel, and we can turn on all the hydraulic pumps, turn all the fuel pumps on, turn on the beacon, the red beacon that is, turn the seatbelt signs on, go back to the virtual cockpit, make sure that the V-speeds are inserted, which they are. Stabilizer trim should be fine. Flight controls we can just check. And that's all fine. And the last thing we can do is turn off the packs, but we won't do that until we've got to clearance. Let's get to clearance. We want to be nose right, tail left. And here comes the tow truck straight through the building. Okay, so they're getting, just inserting the pushback pin. Locking the gear. The bypass pin, not the pushback pin. There we go. So we can now release the parking brakes, and then we can get set to go. So, packs off. There you go, it's got very quiet because the air conditioning's off. Given clearance to start the engines at will, so we'll do engine 2 first.